Ivan Pavlenko, From Family to Family, Chapter 2, Part 3, Volodymyr-Volynsk Camp, read by Natalia Bызова. In the last days of October 1943, our echelon left for Shepetivka and Zdolbuniv and then towards Kovel. But for some reason, it turned back halfway and then in a detour in the western direction. There was a rumor that partisans had broken the track somewhere near Kivertsi. The next day at noon, we arrived in Volodymyr-Volynsk. We got out of the carriages, stood in a column of four and, accompanied by Germans and dogs, marched through the town to the camp. We walked long and hard, because almost every third had a crutch or a walking stick in his hands. People looked and just shook their heads. They would be happy to give something, but the Germans did not allow it. There were two camps in Volodymyr-Volynsk, one with the particularly brutal regime for officers, the other for privates, where we were taken. However, commanders were also there under the guise of privates. I was even shown one general, a tall, stout, 55-year-old man. He had a pillow, and the paramedics fed him better food. I did not see it myself, but they said so. Apparently, there was already an underground organization there. The barracks were smaller than in Slavuta. They seemed to be two-storied brick with barred windows. But the bunks were the same, wooden, two-storied, and the food was the same, and we just wanted to eat. The schedule was strict but fair. Nobody beat or swore at us. As our barrack was disabled, bread, tea, and gruel were delivered by paramedics. Our line was served by Firsov, who was likely a junior lieutenant. He did not swear, he resolved conflicts in a good way, and we respected him. In addition, he was one of the wounded because he limped while walking. And the police didn't care about us. They were on duty outside and watched the various work at the camp. Only our unit was disabled, the rest were workers. The prisoners were taken to work in the city by the Germans. If the guards were sympathetic, the captives brought back potatoes, vegetables, and fruits. Then these products became cheaper in our camp bazaars. I was also a little lucky in this camp. One of the prisoners who was engaged in shoemaking was taken out of the camp. He had some tools that he could not take with him, as he was allowed to take only a bowl and a spoon on the way. And I bought his hammer, a pair of awls, a piece of resin and wax, and a ball of yarn. Everything had been given to him by paramedics, for whom he had sewn or repaired shoes. I gave him my good overcoat for everything, and in addition, I gave him 2 more rations of bread. I had not eaten it for 2 days, and exchanged pots. I had a new state one, and he had a homemade tin one. Although my father did not teach me shoemaking, considering it a dirty craft, I often watched him weave, wire, stitch, hammer wooden nails, and so on. That's why I decided to try, if I could be able at least to repair shoes. I made carnations out of birch logs, rolled up the wires, and started patching my shoes, then the neighbors' shoes, and it worked. However, earnings were small and from time to time, and most importantly, I did not have the skin for the patches at first. But from that work, there was sometimes some food support, especially when I was repairing boots for paramedics. They also brought, in addition to gruel, old shoes from the dead. I repaired them and sold or cut them into patches, ties, soles. Paramedics from other blocks came with bootlegs, gear, and soles so that I could sew new boots for them. but the shoemaker was still not a good one on me, and I had to give up. There were no pads, and I was afraid that I would not manage sewing. Next to me lay Mikhailo Mitrov, a good guy with a crippled leg that had already been healed. I fed him if there was something. He was born in the village of Podkovsky, Uspensky district of Krasnodar region. He spoke with love about his fertile and rich Kuban and the customs of the Cossacks, who had been moved from Ukraine to the Kuban by order of Catherine II. He knew the Ukrainian language and our songs. And before the war, he had worked as a slaughterhouse worker, so we became friends with him. After the war, we corresponded. He is married. He has 2 children. He invited me to visit him, but I did not go because of work and family circumstances. If only it was nearer. I don't know if he is still alive. In 1965, I was in Volodymyr-Volynsk at a seminar for high school teachers. There was a tour of the city, which in the 12th century was the center of the principality. There are still monuments of antiquity. We also visited the place where our camp had been located. I wanted to go to the town and the barracks where I had been lying, but there was a military unit there, and outsiders were not allowed to enter. We visited only the site of the former ditches where the dead prisoners of the camp had been taken in a cart. On the pedestal rises a dried skeleton of a prisoner of war with one hand raised and the other hand supporting a dying comrade. Both are tied with barbed wire. I looked at the monument, listened to the story of the guide, and was not myself. That was noticed by Katerina Ivanivna, the head of the methodical office at the Institute for Teacher Training. She asked, "What's the matter? You are so pale." I replied that I had a headache, but I did not admit that I knew better than the guide what had been happening there. Although it was not Stalin's time, the Soviet government never treated us prisoners of war with sympathy. We were always under suspicion and wrote in our autobiographies and questionnaires when applying for a job whether we were in captivity or in German-occupied territory. There was no Stalin, but Stalinism lived in his ideological successors, especially among elite autocracy.